Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Red Alert Labs, the video number 88. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have been working on securing the PAW or the Privilege Access Workstation, which is a special kind of workstations that are completely secured to use it to connect to high value IT resources in our network. What we mean by high value IT resources in our network, something like the domain controller, something like the important application servers or security application servers, for example, like the antivirus, like the intrusion detection system, like the servers monitoring your network, or a server that it is dedicated to collect, for example, logs, or to have an application on a server to monitor the performance of other servers. So all of these are important high value IT assets that you should connect to remotely, okay, using a special workstation, which is PAW. We have discussed before in the beginning of this series how we can create a privilege access workstation, how we can secure it with a lot of group policies, and how the concept of the PAW works, why we create a PAW, how we create a PAW, how this help us to secure our network more and secure our network widely, or secure our network to make our network more secure. And you have discussed also using the PAW in conjunction or in addition to using tiering in Active Directory, and you have discussed also in the beginning of the series how we can make an Active Directory tiering. So we have discussed in the previous video the first part of the documentation of the Department of Defense of the United States, how we can secure our privilege access workstation. Okay, there is a lot of additional information that I didn't discuss concerning the PAW. Some information the Department of Defense added, new information, new practices, new policies that we can apply to secure our PAW. So let's continue from where we have stopped the last time at this recommendation. Let me wait for a moment, just a moment guys. So here we had stopped the last time at this recommendation, which is device guard code integrity policy must be used on the PAW or the privilege access workstation to restrict applications that can run on the system. So this is something like the app locker group policy. It helps you to control which applications to run on your system, or which applications are authorized to run, or which application a user can run. Okay, so this is the device guard code integrity. It is not used through the normal group policy, but it is used through the application of the Windows Defender. So this is one of the options that you can take advantage through the Windows Defender. So the Windows Defender can help you to control what applications can run on the system. Okay, this is also like the app locker, but I think this option is more let's say it's more effective maybe. But anyway, here is saying that you should make this option available on the PAW. Okay, I think also in the beginning of the lab we have discussed the device guard code integrity, and I think it is enforced already, not only on the PAW but on all of our workstations. So how we can make sure that the device code integrity policy is implemented using the Windows Defender? We can run a simple PowerShell command to see if the device code integrity or device guard code integrity is implemented or not. This code will give us three results: 0 or 1 or 2. 0 means it's not configured, 1 means it is in audit mode, it is only in audit mode, it's not enforced or it's not working, 2 means enforced. And he needs here to get a result of 2. If this is not the case, then you are not implementing the device code or device guard code integrity. So here I have opened the PowerShell. Let's get it back. So we open the PowerShell, run as administrator. So we copy the command and then right click the PowerShell to run it as an administrator. And here we can see that, let me show you something here. Here is the documentation how to use the device guard, okay, and use it here to secure your or to implement a whitelist of authorized applications, not only to the PAW but to any workstation. This can be done using the device guard code integrity policies, or also you can use it through the app locker option through the group policy. And you can see here there is two URLs to how we can implement the device guard to control our applications that can run on any operating system, especially Windows, of course. Anyway, so we open the PowerShell and then begin implement the code. Here we can see that the result was 0, so 2 zeros. Then that means that we don't have our device guard code integrity policy affected, or it's not enforced, or it's not implemented. Okay, he say user mode code integrity policy enforcement 0 and code integrity policy enforcement status 0. So this means that we don't have a device guard code integrity policy applied. Okay, so he's saying that you should check code integrity policy enforcement status. If it is not 2, this one, you should check this one. It is 0 here, so that means it's not enforced. Okay, so I think here I am maybe running the, yes, you can get this through let me stop here. You can get this through a PowerShell, or you can get it from system info. Let me show you all how we can get it here. Just wait for a moment. So we can go, let's wait for a moment. You can open the run. So we can open the run. Let's wait for a moment. Again. So you can open the run. Okay, not this one. Again, let me get back to it. Again. So here it is. You open the run, then msinfo.exe again. So here you copy msinfo.exe and open the run. Okay, and then type it and then okay, and then check the status, or here you should check the device guard status. Let's go to the recommendation and see. Here is saying that you should check device guard code integrity policy in the system summary. If you didn't find it, then that means it is not enforced. We will not find it here, so that means it is not enforced or it's not working. So this is another layer of security to secure your PAW applications. Okay, to only let authorized software to run, okay, and unauthorized software not to run. Okay, this helps you also to mitigate or to protect your PAW against malware. The same applies for the app locker. We have discussed this before. So this is another layer of security in addition to the firewall and the intrusion detection system. Okay, anyway, this machine will not have access to the internet unless you are accessing the Azure cloud, and this will be the only exception. So anyway, so this is one thing we need to check, we need to enforce, and there is a lot of documents. For example, this document will let you or tell you how you can implement device guard through the Windows Defender. Okay, so this is a guide you can use to implement the device guard deployment, or you can deploy the device guard. Anyway, we have discussed the app locker, and this is another layer or does the same function, but I think it's more effective. They say it is more effective or more controllable, or it is more it can control more application or software. Anyway, so this is how we can do it. Okay, you can use the this documentation to plan your device guard code integrity or device code integrity policies implementation. Anyway, I think the app locker is fine for me. Anyway, so this is one, and then you can use another documentation through GitHub. So this is through Microsoft, and there is another documentation through GitHub, which is a very important website that contains a lot of scripts and a lot of tutorials and guides to a lot of things actually. So this is another one. So here we can see that the documentation of the Department of Defense or the technical guides contains a lot of information. This technical guides from the Department of Defense contains a lot of info. Anyway, here he says that this documentation is not available. Anyway, we have a documentation we can use. The first one from Microsoft. If it's not there, we can search the internet. Here I'm trying to get this something here. Okay, so what I have done here I have got the first part of the URL and say that this URL is already moved. Okay, so if you go further here again, here I have got not the complete URL, but I have get the first type of the URL, and then I try to search and see if I can get the same or get this documentation. Here say that this documentation it is moved, or this URL is moved to another URL. So we can go to the new URL and see if the documentation on how to secure or to create a secure PAW workstation. This is a documentation. Actually, it's an old documentation from the Department of Defense on how you can secure a PAW workstation. It's an old one, okay, and actually it's not only for the PAW, for any workstation. Let me show you all. When we get this documentation, you will see it's an old one. It's about 5 or 6 years old, so it's not updated. But let me show, I will show you this documentation. It's called Securehost Baseline. So these are a secure it is some baselines or some steps how you can secure a host, not only PAW but any host. But let me show you all the documentation, because actually it's as I said before, it is a little bit old. It's not working anymore, or I think it's outdated, so I didn't use it, or I didn't put a special interest in it. So let me pause it here quickly to see secure host. So here we can see that Windows secure host baseline. Okay, this is from the Department of Defense. Here we can see that these are a couple of documentations concerning, or these are documentations and baselines how you can secure a host. Okay, I think some of them are a little bit old because it was issued at November. Here we can see that this issue, or it was issued at 2015, so I think this is a little bit old, as we can see. So you can also check the documentation and see, maybe some of them are still working now. But I think the recommendations of the Department of Defense concerning Windows 10 security, or securing Windows 10, the PDF we have discussed in the beginning of the series, I think it's more valuable. Okay, but this maybe contains some scripts, maybe it's a little bit useful. Anyway, you are free to check and see the documentation, or you can see the scripts. Maybe some of them are a little bit useful. Okay, so I didn't have a good look on it. Okay, but this is a baseline, okay, to secure a host. Okay, some group policies, some check compliance checks, configuration tools. I think, as I said before, it's a little bit old maybe, but you can check it and see. Actually, I tried to check it. I noticed that they are a little bit old. Okay, so I think, let me pause it real quickly and go to the files itself. So I have downloaded the files. Here we can see that this documentation or this URL contains the files and a little bit of a guide how to use it, or how to use the files. Okay, so here there is, for example, an Adobe Reader policy, group policy to secure Adobe Reader. Adobe Reader folder contains Adobe Reader DC, computer and user policies. So I have discussed this before, and I have secured Adobe Reader. through the Department of Defense recommendations. The app locker folder, we have discussed this also. The Chrome folder, I think also I have discussed. Edge, which is the same like Chrome. Internet Explorer, securing Office and Office 2016, I have also discussed this before. Windows folder contains Windows 10 users policies, so all of these policies are already implemented through the technical guides of the Department of Defense. What we have already implemented all of these, but you can see the group policies. I think it's a little bit old, as I have said, and there is some scripts he's saying here it's available in the folders. I think some of them, maybe, I don't know if it's, you can see, for example, there is some scripts, for example, located in subfolders available for use so far: Adobe Reader, Certificates, Chrome, General, Windows. Okay, let me check. I think we can have a look about how we can download this, or how these files are a little bit important. Let me go and check and see these files. Maybe there is something useful here. If we go to important CD images, let me see where are these files. Windows Securehost Baseline. Okay, these are the files. Okay, and I think we can have a look on Windows Secure Baseline. Okay, these are this. Okay, and we can go to the scripts. Okay, so some of them maybe need to have a little bit of an attention edit. So function convert a CSV into an Excel sheet. What is this? What is this talking about? This is something to I think to change something to something. This is an Excel. No, let me see the other ones. GitHub, group policy, edit. Anyway, guys, I think these are all group policies and scripts, but you are free to check and see what these things contain. You can maybe see some old files. Okay, I don't know how to use it, but anyway, you are free to choose or to see these guides and check them one by one, because I think this is an old documentation. You can check and see all of the files. Okay, so it's saying here there is also guide getting started to download, configure PowerShell. Okay, so you are free to check the guide, okay, and see if it is still updated or still working or not. I think it's a little bit old, as I said before. So I didn't have a more in-depth view in this documentation, okay, because I think we have already secure our PAW, okay, using a lot of group policies, and we are securing it according to the recommendations of the Department of Defense. Especially it is securing Windows 10, which is the operating system installed on the PAW, or the Privileged Access Workstation. Anyway, so these are things you can check. So here I'm downloading the file. Okay, I'm trying to check it, but anyway, I will not go further anymore. We need to go and continue working with the other recommendations. So I think we can continue working. What I'm doing here, let me check and see. Okay, I think here I am. No, I don't need all of these. So okay, this is device code integrity. I think I'm trying to get a definition about what is device code integrity. And here you can see it's to create a whitelist of applications and extensions within those applications can run on an OS. So it's a whitelist of applications through the Windows Defender that will allow you to run these programs. Okay, so this is a small description about what is device guard control. Okay, so we have already discussed this one. Okay, this is code integrity, and this is user mode code integrity. So here we can see that there is two lines. When we run this command, there is two things, okay? There is two things or two policies concerning the device guard. The two should have a value of 2, and we have seen that both are 0, so that means that device code integrity is not working. And he's saying it is not applicable if you are using Windows Defender endpoint. Endpoint, this is something used through the cloud, okay, or Azure cloud. It controls the applications to run on every PC in the network using the Azure capabilities, okay? So we will run, or we will bypass this one, okay? So it is not working. We have already discussed this, so let's go to the third recommendation. So we'll run the command again. Here is user mode code integrity policy. The other one was other thing, it's not user mode. So there is 2 lines. The 2 lines have a value of 0, okay? So I think we can pass here. We can see, yes, that code integrity, both the first recommendation about code integrity policy enforcement status and the second one is user mode code integrity policy enforcement status, both are two zeros. This should be 2 and 2, okay? So the 2 recommendations talking about this one, okay? So how we can change it, he didn't say in this documentation how we can do this. I think through the Windows Defender, maybe this can be configured through the Windows Defender. Anyway, so we can work now or continue with the other recommendations. Okay, here the PAW must be restricted to only allow groups used to manage high value resources and members of local administrators to log in locally. So he's saying here that the only members that can log into the PAW locally, not through the network or not through the domain, to log in locally outside of the network, locally, only the members that can log in locally are the members of the local administrators group on the machine, okay? So they must only allow groups used to manage high value IT resources in addition to the local administrators group to log in locally. What he mean by high value resources or groups that are allowed to manage high value IT resources, for example, let's say the domain admin, maybe to log in locally. I don't know, he's saying is not here saying, or we have, remember that we have already created 2 work groups, a work group called PAW users and PAW maintenance. So PAW maintenance are IT or users that can log into the machine locally in addition to the local administrator group members on the machine. So these are the 2 groups that are allowed to log in locally and also through the network, the local administrators and the PAW maintenance users. These 2 can log in locally and through the network, okay? So he's saying that you should take care that only the local administrators group members and the PAW maintenance group members to be allowed to log in locally. I think we have already done this also before, but he's stressing on it. So we can go and check and see if we have this already implemented or not. Okay, so we can go to the run and then type gp edit. This is the local group policy. So we can go to the run and then we can go to the run again, run and gp edit .msc, and then we see the local policies or security, then Windows setting, then security, then local policies, then user right assignment to see who are the users that are allowed to log in locally to the machine. This should be the local administrator and the members of the PAW maintenance group. Okay, we have done this before. So go to the local policies, then user right assignments, and then we see the login locally. I think there is another one which is the opposite to it, which is deny. We'll see allow login locally. Here we should have administrators local group, maybe backup operators, yes, this is allowed. Guest and device on, maybe guest, no, guest should be removed. Users should be removed. Okay, he's saying that only administrators, backup operators, plus PAW maintenance users work group or users group should be allowed to log in locally. So the others are not allowed. You need to have only two groups, the local administrators group and the I think the users should be left, but you need to test this setting or test this group. Okay, anyway, so you should check. I think we have done this already when we were configuring the PAW group policy in our group policy management console. We have done this before, denying and allowing, all of this we have done it before. And this one also we have already configured that the domain must be configured to restrict privileged administrator accounts for logging into lower tiers. We have said before that, for example, IT in tier 0 should not access resources in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3. Okay, this should be done. Okay, how we can restrict accessing the domain admin, for example, to access tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 through a group policy, especially not only the privileged administrator accounts or the domain admins, but also not to log in as a normal user, but to log in as a batch job, or to log in as a service, or to log in locally. We have done this before. Remember, guys, we have done this before in the beginning of the series. Okay, we have already created these group policies and we have already configured it. Okay, deny to log in as batch. You should not use high privilege accounts. Okay, especially if they are domain admin accounts, or for example, domain admin account or service accounts. Okay, to run a schedule job through the task scheduler. Or so here batch job here means that you have a user that have high privileges and use it on a machine or on the PAW to run a special task using the task scheduler. So this is not allowed. You should not do this. And also the same as a service, deny as a service should not use a high privilege account to run a service on the PAW. Okay, and you should not also use a high privilege account to log in locally to the machine, except for the local administrators group members and the PAW maintenance user members, okay, or group members. Okay, so here is saying that you should configure the privileged administrator accounts from logging into lower tiers. Okay, we can see, or we remember we have already said this before. If you have the structure of the IT here, or the structure of the red alert, here we have said in this one, okay, that the domain admin, this is a domain admin group. Okay, the domain admin should not access resources or servers in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3. Okay, should not do this. Okay, he will not be able to log in as a normal user, or to log in as a user to run a batch job or a schedule task using the task scheduler. So you should not use the domain admin account to run an automated task through the task scheduler. This is called deny login as a batch job. Or to use the domain admin account to run a service on a machine in tier 1. Okay, service may be an audio service, maybe a service that is important to run an application, for example SQL Server service, for example. Should not a domain admin account to run something like this. Okay, or to use users from high tiers, or users that have high privileges, okay, to run these services on a machine. So what I can do, for example, if I need to run a batch job, for example, on a machine, you should create a limited user only to run this task, not to run it using a high value account like the domain admin. The domain admin have a lot of rights. Okay, so you should not use it to run anything. No, you should create a special user, or a standard user, or a user only to run a job or to run a task, or only a user to run a certain service. Okay, so he's saying here that the high level tier or high level admins in tier 0 should not be able to access any other tiers normally, or to run a schedule task, or to run a service, or to even log in locally. So the domain admin cannot log in locally to any machine in other tier who is authorized to log in locally to any machine in each tier is the local administrators group on the machine in the tier, and the PAW maintenance group users or group user members in this group. Okay, and actually everyone is separated, so the PAW group here is different than the PAW group users here. So PAW maintenance users can access their PAW machines, not PAW machines in other tiers. Okay, so we have done this before, or have said this before. So this is simple, we have done this already. How we can do it? You can do it through a group policy. We have done this before in the beginning of the lab, and I will show you all again where to get these three things here. So here we run the GP edit again, and let's show you all how we can get, or how to configure these things here, or these group policies. We have done this before when we have created the PAW group policy. We have already configured this option. Just a moment, guys. So here we have done this already. So we can see here, deny login locally should also deny a guest to the guest account or login locally. Okay, so this is simple. He's saying domain and enterprise admins are currently required to be included, okay, not to access the domain admin and enterprise admins. Here we have said he had already stated this, or we have said this, the one that I was talking from a couple of seconds. Just wait for a moment, guys. So let's continue, guys. Here we can see that he have already stated here that the domain admins and the enterprise admins should not log into lower tiers. Okay, tier 0 or domain admin should only access tier 0 in the graph. You should not access tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3. So this is already in place. We have done this before. So I think we can continue working. Okay, so he's just stating here. I think we can pass this real quickly. So you should always check down to see if there is any additional resources that the Department of Defense is stating at the bottom of the document or at the bottom of the recommendation, because there is a lot of things, useful data, okay, or useful documents. So I think this is we have already done before. So this is not a new recommendation. We have already did it before. So let's go to the other recommendation. The PAW used to manage Active Directory must only allow groups specially designated to manage Active Directory, such as enterprise and domain admins and members of local administrative groups, to log in locally. So we have already created, okay, a group called PAW users. These are the users that will be allowed to log in locally, log in locally, but they should not have administrative rights on the machine. He's saying here that the PAWs used to manage Active Directory must only allow groups specially designated to manage Active Directory, such as enterprise admins and domain admins. Okay, these two users should be allowed to log in locally, not to manage the machine locally, but to manage the machines or to manage the Active Directory. Okay, so if they try, so by the way, the enterprise admins and domain admin doesn't have administrator rights on the PAW, privileged access workstation. Okay, they only have rights to run or to control the Active Directory. So let's have, for example, let's have an example to demonstrate this. Kareem is a domain admin account. Okay, he logs into the PAW. He can run, or he can go to the Active Directory and create users and groups through the Active Directory console, but he cannot install a program on the PAW, or he cannot remove a program from the PAW. So he can log in to the machine locally. Okay, he can log into the machine through the network or through the Active Directory or through the network or through the domain, but only to do stuff on the Active Directory using the Active Directory console, but not to have administrative rights on the machine, the PAW machine. So we have already created two groups, PAW users and PAW maintenance. So PAW users we should include the enterprise and domain admins in the PAW users, group, so they can be able to log in locally and to log into the machine through the Active Directory. He's saying here again that enterprise admins and domain admins and members of local administrator groups should log in locally, but the only group or the only users that can or that have administrative rights on the machine are the local administrators. Okay, so here we need to see that you have only the administrators, he's saying here, and groups to manage domain controllers and Active Directory. So the groups that should log in locally to the machine are three groups: the local administrator groups, the PAW users group, the PAW maintenance group. PAW maintenance group, its members can or have administrative rights on the PAW only, not all of the workstations in the domain. And the PAW users group, its members can log into the machine locally, okay, and it depends if this user have rights to access the Active Directory or not, but he will not have any administrative rights on the machine. And last is the local administrators group. These members can, or these members have as the PAW maintenance users have administrative rights on the machine. So you need to check and see also the need to see the group policy to make sure that the users that are allowed to log in locally, okay, are these groups or are these users. We have done this before already when we were creating the PAW, so it's not also a new recommendation. We have done it before, so we'll go and check it. So this is the same, or we have already discussed this before, so this is not a new thing to say. So all of these are stressing on that high level accounts should not log into lower tiers, okay. Allow login locally. Here we can see that we should only allow administrators and PAW users and PAW maintenance and local administrators. We have done this before already in the beginning of the lab. So let's see here. The PAW administrator accounts used for maintaining the PAW must be separated from administrative account used to manage high value resources. Again, this we have said this before. Administrator accounts or the local administrator account on the machine should be separated from the account that have administrative rights on the domain controller. For example, the enterprise admin or the domain admin. The enterprise admin account should not be used or should not have administrative rights on the PAW. By default, the domain admin and enterprise admin have administrative rights on all of the machines in the domain. This should not be the case. The enterprise admins and domain admins group should be removed from the local administrators group in all of the machines in the domain. Okay, they can only log in locally on a machine or through the network, but they don't have any administrative rights on the machine. This should be dedicated to the local administrators group members or the PAW maintenance group members. Okay, this is it. Okay, so domain admin account should only log in on a machine and have the rights to control or change the Active Directory, but not to have any administrative rights on the machine or on the PAW machine or any other machine in the domain. Okay, so this is done already using a group policy. We have discussed this before also. So he's here stressing on the same, or he's saying the same recommendations that we have already discussed before. And again, by the way, the PAW maintenance users, okay, have administrative rights on the PAW only, not any other machine. Okay, so this is also another thing to stress on. Okay, so here we are in the recommendation number 15. Okay, we are still going, so we can pass this real quickly because we have already discussed this before again. So let's go to, I think, the next recommendation again. Verify no administrator account or administrator group has been assigned to both the group of PAW workstations administrators or any other group of high value. Okay, this is to separate the PAW maintenance users from any other high value users. So not to put the PAW maintenance user, for example, member to be in a domain admin account, for example. Okay, so this is not the case. So let's go further. So let's continue. Okay, I think we have done this already, so let's here the next recommendation. The PAW must be configured to enforce two-factor authentication and use Active Directory for authentication management. So when you access the PAW, okay, you should use a way of authentication called two-factor authentication. What is an authentication? When you put your username and password to access the machine through the network, your username and password should be verified by the domain controller to make sure that they are right and they have the right to access a machine in the network. This is called authentication process. Okay, this is normally done through authenticating yourself to the domain controller using a username and the password. But because this is a special workstation, you should be authenticated not only through the username and the password, but to have another method of authentication, something like sending, for example, a code to your mobile. Okay, sending a code to your mobile, and then you should type it on the workstation, and if it is right, or for example he will send you a message or SMS on your mobile phone. If you accept the message, or you have read the message, or you have tell him okay to the message, for example, he will let you log into your machine or your PAW. So the authentication, this is similar to what you do when you are accessing your Google email account. So you put your username and password, and then Google sends you a message on your SMS to your mobile phone. If you click OK or you tell him accept, then he will let you access your email. This is the same done to the PAW. Okay, so you should use multi-factor or two-factor authentication, okay, to access your PAW. Okay, to access your PAW. And he's saying here use Active Directory for authentication management. So he's saying here also that the authentication process should be used through the Active Directory. This is normal because actually the PAW is in a domain, so you will access the PAW locally or through the domain, and mostly you are accessing the PAW through the domain. So the authentication will be through the Active Directory. Okay, so we will enforce two-factor authentication. Actually, this can be done using a group policy, and this to verify that the interactive login section require Windows Hello for Business or Smart Card to be enabled. So you can have a multi-factor authentication or a two-factor authentication using an SMS, or to use a smart card or a USB flash. So you can provide a username and the password as the first method of authentication, then you provide a USB stick. This is a second way of authentication, or providing a code or a key you need to type so you can log in, or to be sent an SMS. These are all types of authentication. Okay, so here we will not use the SMS method. We can use a smart card or a USB key or a UB key, for example. This is as they say. So we need to check this, and this to be done on the PAW. And I think, or I prefer the two-factor authentication to be applied to all the workstations in the domain. Okay, and this is very easily implemented using the Azure cloud services. Okay, we will see that later when I finish studying my Azure 801 certificate or course. Okay, so this is done. Basically you need to go and apply this group policy if you need to use multi-factor authentication, and you should check this. If you are not using an SMS as a two-factor authentication method, you can use a smart card or you use a key, a UB key. So you need to check if this is in place or not by checking this group policy. Okay, So this is, I think this is okay. Anyway, so we can pass this real quickly. Anyway, so we can two-factor authentication here is saying that okay, this is what is a multi-factor or two-factor authentication. We all know this one. We need to go to security setting, security settings, security options. Okay, user rights, security options, I think maybe, or local security options, and interactive login for Halo for Business should be enabled, not disabled. Okay, so this is one of the things. So all of these recommendations tend to be more theoretical. Some of them can be checked through a group policy. Some of them is a logical creation of your infrastructure of your Active Directory. The Windows PAW must be use a trusted channel for all connections between a PAW and IT resources. Okay, so this the connection to the resources should be using SSH or TLS or HTTPS protocols. Okay, so this should be done. You should not connect to the resources, for example the domain controller or other resources, with not using a secure channel for connecting to these resources. So how can I know? I can know that my PAW is using a secure channel, or it is encrypting the channel used to connect to the high value resources. You can check it through a registry key. You can see from here he's saying that you should on the PAW verify that IPsec, if you're using a VPN, okay, or SSH or TLS and HTTPS is configured for all connections between the PAW and the managed IT resources on the internet that we have discussed before. So we can go and check this, okay, to see. This is another thing I think we have already also implemented. Remember when we were securing Windows 10, one of the recommendations is to use secure channels to connect the workstations to the domain controller. Okay, this is the normal workstations, and the PAW is included in this. Okay, anyway, so this is also another thing to secure the communication between the PAW and the resources. Okay, so we need to go and check the registry to see if this is implemented or not. So we should run regedit and go to this key and see if FIPS algorithm policy. Here there is something to note. This is an algorithm, okay, or a type of encryption only used within the United States. It's not widely used encryption algorithm, okay, to secure connections. So you should not implement this kind of encryption in your country unless you are inside the United States. There is other encryption methods, for example, I think RIS or something like this, or RSA or other encryption keys. You should not use the FIPS algorithm unless you are in the United States and unless also you are within a government of the United States. This is only used, or it is widely used within the government of the United States. Not a lot of companies can use this kind of encryption algorithm because it's not widely supported with other applications. Okay, so here this recommendation you should not stress on it. Okay, you should not take it into consideration. You should only check if your connection to your servers through the PAW is secure using any type of encryption algorithm, or a secure encryption algorithm, something like RSA or TLS or HTTPS or other protocols. Here if I go to this path, you will see that I don't have this kind of policy enabled. Okay, it is 0, so you can see the red key enabled 0. Then that means that FIPS algorithm protocol is not in place, it's not enabled. So the FIPS algorithm is only used within the United States, and especially in the government of the United States, and actually it's not widely used because it's not widely supported for many companies. Okay, so until it's widely used and supported, I prefer not to use this kind of algorithm. You can use any encryption key unless it is encryption key, it's widely used encryption algorithm. Anyway, you can see here also that if you are accessing a browser, for example, you are going to the Azure, you should use a HTTPS connection over TLS. So this is something logical. Okay, to use let me see, to use or to connect to your intranet websites, these intranet websites should use a protocol HTTPS to secure the connection between the client and the intranet website, for example, like the Azure or outside. Okay, so this can be done, as you say, if IPS algorithm can be checked through the registry key and change it manually, or you can do it through playing with a group policy or your local group policy. If we go further down, both the browser and the web server must be configured to use TLS, otherwise the browser will not be able to connect to a secure site. Should both your browser and the web server or the web or the server hosting the application should use a TLS connection. Okay, so this is especially, or this is, all of these are good thing to go. So let's see how we can enable FIPS algorithm through the group policy. So we can go through the security setting, local policy and security options to enable the FIPS, and I do not encourage you to enable this kind of encryption unless you are inside the United States. Okay, so this is disabled even by default. Microsoft have this option disabled, or this group policy disabled by default. So we can go and continue working. If several PAWs are set up in a virtual machine on a host server, the host server must only contain PAW VMs. So if you intend to have several PAW or PAWs to be as a virtual machines, we have discussed before that you can, for example, connect to the Active Directory using a physical machine. This is one. So a physical machine can be used to access the Active Directory console, and to have other virtual machines, for example, to have a virtual machine to access your email and internet, and to access this virtual machine using a standard user without any rights, and another machine, virtual machine, to access other machines and do administrative tasks on it, install an application or not, or something like this. If you intend to have your virtual machines to be hosted on a server, not on the workstation itself. So for example, if you have a physical machine to connect to the Active Directory, and you need a virtual machine to access your email and another virtual machine to access other machines, and these virtual machines will be hosted on a Hyper-V server. This Hyper-V server should only include the virtual machines for the PAW. It doesn't contain any other virtual machines for any other servers or any other things. It's only dedicated to the PAW VMs or the PAW virtual machines. This is one thing. He's saying, I don't know why this is in place, but he's stressing on that only if a server will host the PAW will host your virtual machines for the PAW on a server, this server should only include PAW VMs. I think because if it is already hacked, this will not hack the other VMs, so he can only hack the PAW but not to hack the other servers. Okay, anyway, so he's saying this, you should review all of the configuration of all of the host servers where PAW VMs are installed. Verify that only VMs installed on the host server are PAW VMs. Let's see here why is to remove, including these apps are function accessible security. This okay between allow an exception to requirement. Anyway, he's not saying a reason for doing this, but I think there is a logical thing, because if the server is hacked, then it will only hack the PAW VMs, not all of the. If you have another VMs, for example, for a domain controller as a virtual machine, you will hack the domain controller. You will hack only the PAW VMs. Contain non-PAW VMs. So let's go further. The PAW must be configured so that all inbound ports and services to a PAW are blocked except as needed for monitoring, scanning, and management tools, or when the inbound communication is a response to an outbound request. So he's saying here that any inbound connection, Inbound mean connections that are coming to the PAW should be blocked unless it is a program monitoring the PAW. For example, if I have a server and this server need to communicate to a ports to this PAW machine to monitor the status or the performance of the PAW, this should be allowed. Scanning, if the antivirus or antivirus server is scanning the machine, management tools. If, for example, you are using an Active Directory console to connect to other server or to connect to the domain controller, the port communicating to the Active Directory should be allowed. So here this is related mostly to the Windows Firewall, and we have already imported certain firewall rules that are already made and provided by the Department of Defense, so we can import it to the PAW and it will do all of these things. Okay, so he's saying a main security construct of a PAW is that a workstation is isolated from most internet threats, including phishing, impersonate, and credential theft attacks. So anyway, obtain a list of ports and services required for site monitoring, scanning, and management tools. So you should only allow certain ports to communicate to the PAW. These ports should be, for example, the port to connect to the Azure cloud, for example, the port to connect to the server log collector, for example, the server monitoring server, or server monitoring the status of the PAW, the antivirus server that is scanning the PAW, for example, the management tools, the ports that we use to communicate to the Active Directory console. All of this should be allowed to pass the firewall, the Windows Firewall. We have already a firewall rule imported to the PAW Windows Firewall. We have done this earlier. Okay, so we do not need to revise or to do anything. We have already, I have showed you all that we have already a file we imported to a group policy. This file will be imported to the Windows Firewall in the PAW, and it already have some pre-configured rules, and all of these are provided by the Department of Defense, so you should not bother yourself with configuring anything. Okay, so this is already something we can pass this real quickly, outbound connections. Anyway, so let's continue with the other recommendations. So we go to the recommendation, I think number maybe something here, control panel. Where I'm going here, Windows Defender Firewall. I don't think what I'm doing here. So this here you can see the advanced setting, and from there you can see the firewall rules. Okay, we have already inbound rules. So here, remember that I have already imported, I have a group policy to import rules, inbound and outbound rules to the Windows Firewall in the PAW. We have created a special group policy to do this, to import some firewall rules, the Windows Firewall in the PAW. Okay, so we have done this before. Okay, so this is very simple to have, and this is already, we have discussed this and we have already done this before, inbound and outbound rules. Okay, so we have done this before. Let's continue with the other recommendation. The Windows must be flagged to all outbound connections to the internet are blocked. So he's saying here that inbound connections coming to the PAW, outbound that are going out. We have said before that no internet connection should be available for the PAW, and this will be controlled using the firewall. So he's saying here that outbound connections to the internet from a PAW are blocked. Okay, except for the Azure, for example, Azure Cloud website. Some exceptions. Okay, so also this is already implemented. We have done this before. Okay, the host, let's see here, host firewall to block all outbound connections, requests to the internet gateway, or to configure the PAW with an internet proxy address with a loop address. We have seen this, that we can configure a proxy server with a proxy server with an IP address of 127.0.0.1, and this will block the internet completely. We have done this also when we're configuring the PAW, and we have already also configured the app locker to block internet through using the famous browsers like the Chrome or the Edge and so on. So we have done this already. So let's continue. Okay, we have done this before. Request to gateway host firewall. Anyway, so this is already done. We have only 4 left. The local administrator groups on the PAW must only include groups with accounts specially designated to administer the PAW. So he's saying here that the local administrators on the PAW should only manage the PAW. So we have a group called PAW maintenance users. This will be a member of the local administrators group on the PAW machine. So that makes only on the local administrators group on the PAW workstations, not on all of the local administrators group on all of the other machines. So this will make them only local administrators on the PAW workstations. So the PAW maintenance group will only be local administrators on the PAW workstations. How we do this? By making the PAW maintenance group to be a member of the local administrators group on the PAW workstations. This is also a very logical thing to say. Then the next recommendation: local privilege groups excluding administrators on the PAW must be restricted to include no members. So we have a lot of local groups on the PAW. We have backup operators group, we have a lot of local groups with different predefined rights. There should be no members in all of the local groups on the PAW workstation except for the local administrators group. Okay, so for example, there is a backup operators group, local group called backup operators, local group called cryptic operators, Hyper-V administrators, network configuration operators, power users, remote users, replicators. So these are all local groups. Every member of this group have certain rights. So for example, if you put a user in the remote desktop users, this user can access remotely this machine. If you put a user in the backup operators local group, then he can back up the machine. So he is stressing that you should only have members in the local administrators group. All of the other local groups should be without members or have no members. How we can do this, or how we can check this? We can go and check this by ourselves. So let's see this. We have done this already before, by the way. When I was configuring the PAW, I have done this before. So we can go to this PC and tell him manage, right click and manage, and see the members of so we have right click this PC and manage, and then see the local users and groups and check one by one. And you can see here every group, you can see the description of what the members of this group can do. Here I am just arranging it, so we can see here that backup operators, here they can, if you can go further, backup operators can override security restrictions for the sole purpose of backing up or restoring files. Okay, so this is, the users will have this right. Okay, there is no members. Okay, so I can check it one by one. Cryptic operators, members are authorized to perform cryptic encryption methods or encryption processes. Network configurations, administrative privilege to manage configuration of networking. All of these we don't see any members. Power users will not have any members. Included for backward compatibility and possesses limited administrative rights. This group is already it's not available anymore in Windows 10. It was removed. Crimes login. Here we can see that I am only available to log in remotely to this machine. So I'm a member of the remote users group. So we can see there is no members in these groups unless you are a virtual, it is a virtual machine. He is saying an exception. If the Hyper-V environment is used, the Hyper-V administrator group can include members. This is logical. Okay, so let's continue. We have only two more recommendations, and then we have finished, or we will finish this document. The restricted remote administration must be enabled for high value systems. If you are connecting remotely to a machine, okay, using the PAW, the remote there is something called restricted remote mode. This will help you to secure your remote connection. Okay, saying here remote restricted mode features restricted mode or admin mode and remote credential guard for remote desktop protocol are additional safeguard against pass-the-hash attacks. So here is saying that the restrict mode administration and the restricted admin mode and the remote credential guard, these are all methods to help you not to have your password and username hacked during the remote process connection to a server or to a machine. Okay, so restricted, let's see here, where attacks attempt to gain higher administrative privileges from a single compromised machine. Restrict remote administration protects administrator accounts by ensuring that reusable credentials are not stored in a memory on the remote device that could potentially be compromised. So it's saying here that to access a machine remotely, you open, for example, the remote desktop connection and put the password. This password is saved to the memory on the machine which are using the remote desktop connector on it. So he's saying that this will not be done to help you not to if this machine is hacked, the hacker will not go to the memory and compromise or take the password. Not stored in a memory on a remote device that could potentially be compromised. When restricted remote administration is implemented, the local RDP service tries to log into the remote device using a network login. So the user credentials are not sent across the network. Anyway, we don't know the method, but he's saying that this mode should be enabled on all of your remote desktop connections to servers or any workstation. So how we can know that we have the remote or restricted remote administration enabled? We should go and see the registry key, so we can go and check the machine. Let's go further. So I will take this and check if I have this enabled on my remote desktop protocol. So let's go and see if this is already done or not. So we'll go and check it and see. And by the way, actually also this recommendation I have already said or stated before when I was using when I was creating the PAW. I have already said this before. So this is also another thing to state. All of these recommendations we have already implemented and we have already seen it. And actually it's a good thing to revise these recommendations just to refresh our mind and to see this recommendations written in a way we can understand, and it's actually documentation, a very important documentation to understand what we are doing here. Okay, anyway, so we will see that disable restricted admin. I think I don't have this enabled. Okay, so this is something also to note. Here also we can enable this through a group policy, through system administrative templates, system credential delegation, restrict delegation of credentials to remote servers to be enabled. So starting he's saying, let's see this recommendation. So we can see this, we can enable it through a group policy or through through registry. Okay, we can do this. So also I think this is through system. We have done this already before. So he's saying that from Windows 10 16.07 version, this setting also requires selection of an option for use the following restricted modes. Anyway, so here is saying restrict delegation. Okay, here is saying restrict delegation of credentials to remote servers. This is the one that we need to configure. Okay, and we should choose number 1, restrict credential delegation. We should open it, okay, and tell him to enable, and then we should use, I think, the first restrict credential delegation. Participating application must use restricted admin or remote credential guard to connect to the remote host. So we should use enable and use the first one, restrict credential delegation. So let's tell him enable credential guard. This is the first one, credential delegation guard. This is the first one. Okay, so let's continue. Require, let's see here, not require remote credential guard, prefer remote credential guard, prefer remote credential guard. This is the first one. Okay, prefer remote credential guard. This is the one that we should use. Okay, this is the one that we should use, I think. So we can go further. Here we can see that we have require remote credential guard, require restricted mode, restrict credential delegation. I think this is the one, restrict credential delegation. We should use restrict admin or remote credential guard. So this one will use both, restrict credential delegation. We will use the third one, not the first or the second. These two are included in the last one. Okay, so this is also a good thing to go. Let's go to the last, I think the last recommendation. The last recommendation says that the PAW that are set up on virtual machines on host server, domain administrative account used to manage high value resources must not have access to the VM hosting operating system OS. Only domain administrative accounts designated to manage PAW should be able to access the VM host OS. So he's saying here again, he's stressing on, if you have a server that are hosting PAW virtual machines, the domain admin account should not have administrative rights on this server. Okay, only the local administrators should have administrative rights on this PAW operating system. Okay, so if you have a server, Hyper-V server hosting PAW VMs, the user that have administrative rights on this machine is the local administrators. The domain admin should not have administrative rights on this machine. Okay, so this is also another thing. He's saying that domain administrative accounts used to manage high value IT resources must not have access to VM hosting operating system. Only domain administrative account designated to manage PAW, this is the PAW maintenance users, should be able to access the VM hosts OS. So I think this is one thing to say, or this is the last one. And now we have finished the recommendations of the Department of Defense securing the PAW. This is the part 2 and the last part. Hope this video is informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.